are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for all right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the final
keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth Grunfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Monday, July 22nd. We have a lot to talk about on the show today. Before I get into that, just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate and get your comments recognized, make sure to go to the following link. That is gsmcpodcast.net. Really helps the show, makes the show more interactive between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. Again, that is gsmcpodcast.net. And as always, it is displayed on the ticker at the bottom of the show segment down below. So, let's get into what we are going to discuss for today. I hope everybody had a good weekend. So, we're going to continue our quarterback rankings for each division. Today, I will be going over the AFC North quarterbacks, so that'll get us started. Then we will talk about the Dallas Cowboys in the second part of the show, some recent comments made by Stephen Jones. Because, the Cowboys, again, we still got to see how they're going to work out their contract situations with their players, specifically Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb. So I'll talk about what he had to say. Then in the third part of the show, we'll talk about some comments made by John Harbaugh about Lamar Jackson and how he could become the greatest ever. So we'll get into that. We'll talk about Darren Waller and what he had to say about Daniel Jones as Daniel Jones gears up for this 2024 campaign as the Giants starting quarterback for the moment. And then in the final part of the show, we'll give you a little bit of an update on Jordan Love and his contract talks. They seem to be heating up, supposedly. So we'll get into that as well. And like I said, hope everybody had a good weekend. And let's get started here. So let's rank the quarterbacks in the AFC North, shall we? So, I honestly, doing it last night, I kind of thought it was difficult, particularly the 3 and 4 spots. So, I'll go over it right now. So, to start off the list here, we got Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. And Russell Wilson is now Russell Wilson's probably going to be the starter to start the year. And, he's coming off of a good year, numbers-wise. Now, the numbers don't tell the full story, but, you look at his stats, 26 touchdowns to 8 interceptions, 3,000 yards passing. I mean, compared to the previous season, now he did have 3,500 yards passing, but he did have 16 touchdowns to 11 picks. So the touchdown to interception ratio improved, and, the Broncos at one point looked like, hey, maybe this team could squeak into the playoffs. I mean, compared to how they started off. They looked like they were going to finish with one of the worst records in football, but it ended up finishing 8-9 on the season. But right now he's looked at as the starter at the moment. But you wonder what kind of leash he's going to have, because they could opt to go with Justin Fields. And last year, Justin Fields, 2,500 yards passing, 16 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. So I don't know. I mean, there are people that say that Justin Fields deserves to start. There's people that believe Russell Wilson should start. I do lean towards Russell Wilson starting. Now, my thing with the Steelers is there are some issues on the offense, particularly who's going to step up and be that number 2 wide receiver. I know looking at Van Jefferson's player profile on the Sleeper app for fantasy, I think I saw something that said he looks like he's standing out as that number 2. They drafted Roman Wilson out of Michigan to maybe take on a big role in this offense and maybe be that number 2 long term. because we kind of know what Van Jefferson is. Because the Steelers went out and they signed guys like they signed Van Jefferson. They also signed Quez Watkins. They signed guys that are more for depth purposes. And of course, you have George Pickens, and we'll see how he is. If they could find stability at the quarterback position, you would think George Pickens is going to have a big year. And they made improvements to the offensive line as well, and that's going to help out the running game. So, in terms of the supporting cast within this division, I think the Steelers do have the worst supporting cast, but I don't think it's a bad supporting cast. So that's one of the reasons why I'd probably put these two guys at 4, and also because they could both see playing time. It's possible. Like if the Steelers, let's say are like 2-5 or something, then maybe they think, all right, let's give Justin Fields a chance. That's just me. We'll see what happens, but at least for the moment, Russell Wilson is going to be the starter. So that's where I rank the Steelers quarterbacks, and it's been a couple times now. Well, now a few times. I had the Vikings. I had Sam Darnold and J.J. McCarthy, and then Jacoby Brissett and Drake May. So, yeah, this is another case where it's just you don't really know how the season's going to play out with the Steelers quarterback situation. So then at number 3, and there's pressure on this guy to go out there and play well, and that's Deshaun Watson. And we've talked about him a handful of times this offseason. Where he's at with his rehab. Actually, like Russell Wilson, because the Steelers say he looks like, he's the Russell Wilson from Seattle. So we'll see if they're actually telling the truth. But yeah, the Browns, they feel confident with Deshaun Watson. Now, it's a little different because Russell Wilson's not coming off of an injury from the last 2 seasons. Deshaun Watson's been banged up. Season ended early last year, and even before that really wasn't playing great. There's pressure on him to do well. And, the Browns, again, 5 different starting quarterbacks last season, and they still made the playoffs. Got to give them credit, but they're hoping that doesn't happen again, and Deshaun Watson goes out there and plays every game. And even if he misses, a couple games, all right. Because they have Jameis Winston, and you got Tyler Huntley as well, Pro Bowl quarterback. So they got depth at the quarterback position, but you don't want to see those guys. You want to see Deshaun Watson play the whole season. So, and I think the Browns supporting cast is better than the Steelers. You got Nick Chubb coming back from injury, and you hope that he bounces back because, he's a great player, but, it's a tough knee injury to come back from. So, and the Browns are going to try to ease him back into it. You still got Jerome Ford. They brought in Deontay Foreman. And the offensive line, you hope, can stay healthy as well. And then you got the pass catchers. They still got to figure out contracts with Amari Cooper, contract situation with him. They brought in Jerry Jeudy. They gave him a contract extension. Elijah Moore, David Njoku. There are weapons on this team. My problem with Deshaun Watson is, he's inaccurate sometimes, the turnovers. And yeah, how is he going to bounce back from this injury? That's what I'm looking at. So I don't know if we're going to get the Deshaun Watson from the Texans days when he was playing really well and making the playoffs. But I'm going to put him at 3 because he is the starter. Like, they're not going to change that. Now, if he plays, like, really, really bad, then maybe they do have to put in somebody else. But I don't think he's going to be like that. I think he's going to be inconsistent. That's really how I put it. He's going to be inconsistent. He's going to make good plays, but then he's also going to make some bad plays, and he's going to turn the ball over. So I'm going to put him at 3, though. So at number 2, again, another guy coming off of an injury, and, I'm a little worried about it, the wrist, but I got to put him at 2 because when he's healthy, he is one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and that's Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow's season got cut short last season because of the wrist, and he was banged up a lot last year. He had the calf injury, and then, of course, the wrist injury, which effectively ended his season, like I just said. But when he's right, like I said, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And this is the toughest division in football. So, for the Bengals, they are going to have to, play really well because, like I said, it's the toughest division in football. And it was interesting because I was kind of the other night I was kind of eavesdropping on, a conversation that some of my friends were having when I was out. And one of my friends did say that he thinks the Bengals are going to finish last in the division, which I thought was interesting. If Joe Burrow gets hurt, that could very well happen. Because if he gets hurt, the Bengals are not going to do anything this year. This season, all lies on Joe Burrow's health. Because if he's not healthy, the Bengals are not going to go anywhere. And you got T. Higgins coming back. You still got Jamar Chase. The running game's going to be a little bit different without Joe Mixon. You got Zach Moss now. You brought in Mike Gesicki. Jermaine Burton's going to take over, I guess, in that Tyler Boyd role as the number 3 guy. So, there could be some guys that are on their way out after this year. Well, particularly T. Higgins. So, I'm curious to see how they're going to balance the running game in this offense. But, the Bengals are going to be throwing it a bunch of times. But if Burrow's healthy, he could be 1. But right now, I'm going to put him at 2. So if he's healthy, I expect him to go out there and have a good year, and I expect the Bengals to be a problem in the AFC once again. And then at number 1, a guy that we're going to talk about a little bit later in the show, that's Lamar Jackson. The reigning MVP, now 2-time MVP. I got to put him at 1. The last couple years, dealt with injuries, but you see when Lamar Jackson plays a full season, the Ravens, you see what they could do as a team. They get all the way to the AFC Championship game. So, and I think Joe Burrow is a better passer than Lamar Jackson. I think Lamar has gotten better throwing the football these last few years. And you'd like to see, they're another team. You'd like to see, who's going to step up as that number 2 wide receiver. Because you got Zay Flowers. They paid Rashad Bateman, so I guess they're banking on him being that guy. But who's going to step up and be that number 2 wide receiver? Because you got Mark Andrews and you got Isaiah Likely. They got 2 good tight ends. You got Derrick Henry coming out of the backfield. But like I said, who's going to be that number 2 wide receiver? But yeah, I expect Lamar Jackson to go out there, play really well, have another good year. And again, another part of his game is running the football. And that's what makes him one of the most electrifying players in the league. And if he stays healthy, the Ravens are going to have a good year. So, I got him at 1. Now, again, like I said, you could put Burrow at 1. It's tough. But because Lamar Jackson's coming off of his MVP season, and I'm still a little worried about the Burrow wrist injury, I got Lamar Jackson at 1. So to kind of just go through it once again, so you got the Steelers quarterbacks at 4, Deshaun Watson 3, Joe Burrow 2, Lamar Jackson 1. So let me know what you guys think about those rankings. How would you rank them? I thought these were hard because, you could even put like Deshaun Watson last and move the Steelers quarterbacks up. It's tough, but I think Burrow and Lamar Jackson, it's easy to, they're the top 2. And you could put, you could flip them around, but that's how I have it. So let me know what you guys think about my rankings there. So we're going to take our first break of the show, and then when we come back, we will talk about the Dallas Cowboys. We'll talk about some comments made by Stephen Jones regarding the Cowboys, star players and, some updates on that, what he had to say, because, they got to pay their stars, and we'll see if they pay all their stars. We'll get into that when we come back from our first break. So, with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh,
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast, and for the second part of the show, we are going to talk about the Dallas Cowboys. We'll talk about Stephen Jones, some comments that he made recently just regarding, the Cowboys star players, and, they're trying to keep all these guys, but it's going to be tough. So I just wanted to get into what he had to say. So he said regarding, actually talking about Mike McCarthy first, because, Mike McCarthy's on the last year of his contract. But yeah, so this is what he said. He said, well, those things take time. This is what he said on the Scoop City podcast via The Athletic. And he said, and we're talking about deals here, when you're talking about CeeDee and Dak, and somebody like Micah coming up. I mean, you're talking about two players that aren't quarterbacks that feel like they ought to be a little bit like the Vikings' Justin Jefferson, the top paid non-quarterbacks in the league. And then, of course, you have Dak. Obviously, his resume speaks for itself. He was second in MVP voting last year. He's just he's just had an extraordinary career here in Dallas. And those things just take time when you're talking about the amount of money involved. And, of course, we're trying a little bit play Houdini and how to keep all those guys around Dak and keep these players we were fortunate enough to draft. And I think that he did say they're having those conversations with Dak's agent in the article that I have here. And then he also said, when you start stacking them up like that, it's a challenge. It's not that it's not doable, but you certainly got to have some give and take if you want to do that. We got a lot of guys making, quite a bit of money, and that's no excuses. That's no excuses. We think we can get these done. No, we can get it done, but it just takes time, which is true. I do agree with that, but yeah, I'm just curious, as to how this is going to play out. I mean, they do want to keep Dak, but is Dak going to end up leaving? And I know his family members kind of want him to leave Dallas, I believe. Right now he's in the final year of his contract, and his cap hit is $55 million, which is 21.2% of the team's cap. CeeDee Lamb's in the final year of his contract. He's making $17.9 million. And then Micah Parsons has 2 years remaining on his contract. Now, I've said all along that I think Dak is probably going to end up leaving. But, again, who knows? That's just the way things are going. That's how I feel. Dak right now is tied as the 12th highest paid quarterback with Daniel Jones. And he led the league with 36 touchdown passes last season. CeeDee Lamb, 135 receptions. His salary right now is outside the top 20 for wide receivers. So he wants to get in, not just like the top 10 or the top 5. He wants to be like the top 2. He wants to be the number 1 guy. And based off of the season that he had, I mean, I know I said I don't think he's going to get Justin Jefferson type money because that's just me thinking, well, I think Justin Jefferson is better than CeeDee Lamb. But CeeDee Lamb could eclipse that and become the highest paid receiver in the league. And then some other players that are making a lot of money. So DeMarcus Lawrence, $20.4 million against the cap. Zach Martin, $15.5 million. And Trayvon Diggs, $14.1 million. So those are just some other notable players. And Trayvon Diggs, of course, is coming back from injury last year, tore his ACL, which was, it's a big piece on their defense. So, yeah, it's going to be tough. It's really going to be tough. I mean, Micah Parsons right now, he's going to be dealt with last because, there's still some time. But he wants his new deal. CeeDee Lamb, I mean, I've said all along the Cowboys are trying to make him a priority. He's the priority right now. They're trying to get a deal done with him. And then I guess they'll focus on Dak and see if they can get a deal done with him. But I don't know. I don't know if that's going to be the case. If he's going to end up staying. I think, like I said, I think ultimately what's going to end up happening is he's going to leave and he's going to go somewhere else. And there'll be spots that open up that I'm sure he's gonna find a job, no problem. Because teams always need a quarterback. So, and who's gonna be the team that'd be willing to pay him the money that he wants? And I know Dak in some interviews, has talked about how he doesn't have to be the highest paid quarterback, but he wants to get paid a lot of money. And I don't think Dak. I think Dak deserves to get paid, of course, but I mean, I don't look at him as one of the top guys. There are quarterbacks that I would rank ahead of him. But I don't think he deserves, top dollar and be the highest paid quarterback. I just don't. I think he's a solid quarterback, and and I've said that I wasn't always a big Dak guy. And you could say, well, it's because you're a Giant fan. No, it's just, for me, Dak's a good regular season quarterback. You get to the postseason, and he just doesn't get it done. He's got 2 playoff wins in 8 years. He's kind of having the same career that Tony Romo had, where you put up good numbers in the regular season, you get to the playoffs, and then nothing happens. That's kind of how I view him. But you know what? You could say that about a lot of guys. Do well in the regular season, get to the postseason, and they can't get the job done. And he's one of those guys that falls in that category. And I think the Cowboys, they've had a lot of talent on this team ever since he took over as a starting quarterback back in 2016. Now, I feel like offensively, especially going into this year, of course, you have CeeDee Lamb, who is, a top 2 wide receiver in the league. But in years past, the Cowboys have had more talent. I think, trading away Amari Cooper and now losing Tony Pollard, you look at this running game, who's going to step up? I know they brought back Zeke, but Zeke is not the same player that he once was. I think the Cowboys' offense is still going to be good. You got Brandon Cooks, Jacob Ferguson. The Cowboys, like I've always said, the Cowboys always seem to have a good tight end. But I don't know. For me, it's CeeDee Lamb, and then it's a lot of it's question marks. You got Brandon Cooks, like I said, but Brandon Cooks is getting older. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like from when Dak first started to now, like that 2016 offense, with Dez Bryant and prime Zeke, and that the offensive line when it was still intact. Because it's different now. Now you got no more Tyron Smith. It's just Zach Martin from that offensive line, because they had Travis Frederick, who retired. Tyron Smith, like I said. I think that Doug Free was on the 2016 team. I know he's on the 2014 offensive line, but yeah, it's just guys have left or retired. That offensive line's different now, and they had Biotish go to the Commanders. So, it's just it's the offensive line. It's got some moving pieces, and I know they had to address the offensive line in the draft. But yeah, I don't know. Looking at this Cowboys offense, it's going to be good, but I still have there's some guys that are going to have to step up. So. We'll see how that ends up going, but right now there is no. The Cowboys are working on these things behind closed doors. Right now there's no real updates, but they're having conversations with Dak. They want to make CeeDee Lamb a priority, which I've talked about already on the show before. So it's just more waiting. That's really what it is. It's just more waiting. And I know some of you are probably getting sick of me being repetitive, but that's what happens, especially in the off season, because we get to certain points where it's just there's nothing going on, and just got to continue to play that waiting game until something does end up happening. So that's what we're going to continue to do. But you just hope that, Dak is going to play. He's not going to hold out, and I don't believe. But, CeeDee Lamb, it's possible he holds out. Even though, he has said he's not going to. But you don't want any of this leaking into the regular season, which I don't think it's going to. Now, I know what was a problem for the Cowboys is, waiting to pay CeeDee Lamb because you had all of these receivers get paid, and now CeeDee Lamb's like, well, I want to get what they got. So that kind of hurt them. But that's really my thoughts on it. We just, like I said, we just got to continue to play that waiting game. But if they get CeeDee Lamb done, that's at least one step forward. And then I guess they'll work on Dak. And if they can't get to an agreement with him, then they're going to have to go in a different direction at quarterback. And I know Trey Lance's name has been floating around because they brought him in. And that could end up being the backup plan if Dak does not stay with the Cowboys. But maybe he ends up with the Giants. If the Giants ended up signing Dak, which I don't think would happen, I don't know how it would feel. He would be the Giants' starting quarterback, so you got to root for him. But it would just be very strange if that did end up happening. Because I know, looking at like a possible, articles that have come out with possible destinations for Dak, the Giants were on a list because who knows what's going to happen with Daniel Jones, who is another guy that we will talk about a little later in the show as well. So, like I said, we just got to continue to play that waiting game, folks. It's just I keep repeating myself with certain guys in certain situations, but that's just how it is right now. So we just got to continue to play that waiting game. But let me know what you guys think. How do you see all this playing out with the Cowboys? Do you think they're going to be able to keep everybody, or is someone leaving? And again, I think it's Dak at the moment. So we're going to before we go to break, I just want to remind you guys again, tipper donating and your comments recognized. Make sure to go to the following link, that is gsmcpodcast.net. Again, really helps the show, makes the show more interactive between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. Again, that is gsmcpodcast.net. And as always, it is displayed on the ticker at the bottom of the show segment down below. So when we come back from our second break of the show, we'll talk about some comments made by John Harbaugh on Lamar Jackson. We talked about Lamar Jackson a little bit before. Just talk about him as well as the Ravens going into the 2024 season, but particularly what he had to say about Lamar Jackson and about possibly being the greatest ever. So, with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the third part of the show, we'll talk about the Ravens, talk about some comments made by John Harbaugh regarding Lamar Jackson, and him making a bold statement that Lamar Jackson can become the best quarterback in NFL history. So I just wanted to get into that and give you my thoughts on it. So this is what he had to say. This is courtesy of an article that I have, an article from foxsports.com. So he said, the vision that we have together is that Lamar Jackson is going to become and be known and be recognized as the greatest quarterback ever to play in the history of the National Football League. That's the vision. It's going to happen by Lamar, his work ethic, and his brilliant talent, by all of us pouring into that effort together as a team teamwork, and by the grace of God and God's goodwill. That's how it's going to happen, and I believe it like we've already seen it. And he also said, I read the stuff. Now this is about the critics. I read the stuff. I see the guys say what they say on the shows. At least I get the clips of them because they come up on your phone. There's a lot of great things said about Lamar, but there's a lot of stuff that's said that you got to just scratch your head about and kind of wonder, what's this person even thinking? But we take it personally. Lamar's a guy. All his life, Lamar Jackson has been a guy who's been answering those same questions. I'm talking about since he was a kid. Junior high, high school, college, the draft, the success he's had in the National Football League, and it still comes up. He's got a growth mindset. He's going to get better and better, no doubt. But what does he have to do to prove to some people, right? We've always had a vision for Lamar Jackson, and it started with Lamar's vision and his mom's vision when he said he was going to be a quarterback. We bought into that. We embraced it. We built an offense for it in 19. We're building another offense for it in 23 and 24 going forward, right? The next iteration of our offense around Lamar Jackson. So a lot to say there. Now, I'm going to start off by saying I don't think at the end of the day, at the end of Lamar's career, I don't think we're going to look back and say, yeah, he's the greatest ever. But can he be one of the greatest ever? I think so. But based on the talent. But here's the thing. I think at least the criticism that I have for Lamar, and I talked about it a little bit before, I think Lamar Jackson has gotten better throwing the football. Because I know that was one criticism for him. I think he's gotten better with that. And you know what? He's got 2 MVPs. You got to give him the credit. This is where the criticism comes. And that is getting to the playoffs and getting to a Super Bowl and winning a Super Bowl. That's where it comes from. And the team that has stood in their way last year was the Chiefs. And that is a team that has given Lamar Jackson a problem over the years, particularly in the regular season, but now it's leaked into the postseason. And, you know, the Chiefs in a year where offensively they struggled and it looked like it wasn't going to be their year, and the Ravens were playing like they were the best team in football for most of the season, up until that point, it looked like the Ravens were going to get through and go to the Super Bowl, and it just didn't happen. The Chiefs won that game. You know, and that's where my criticism comes. You know, Lamar Jackson, he did win that playoff game a couple years ago against Tennessee. He got over that hump. But now it's about taking that next step. Because, you know, you had the game against the Bills after your first playoff win. Didn't play well in that game. You know, let's not forget when, you know, first year he made the playoffs after he took over for Joe Flacco. You lost to Phillip Rivers and the Chargers at home. You know, you didn't score a touchdown until, you know, like, what was it, like 5 minutes left in the game back in 2018. Then the following year, you're the 1 seed. The Titans come in. You know, Derrick Henry runs all over that defense. Lamar Jackson didn't play well in that game. They lose that game. You know, you lose to the Bills the following year. Last couple of years, he was injured. And you saw the impact that he had on the Ravens when he got hurt. The Ravens didn't make the playoffs. Then they did make the playoffs, but you had Tyler Huntley starting. And they could have won that game against the Bengals. And then you see the impact that Lamar Jackson has when he's healthy. You know, the Ravens, this was a very good team last year. They were the 1 seed. They had a very good defense. And that's, you know, that side of the ball has gotten banged up a lot over the years since Lamar's gotten drafted. And, you know, the running back situation, you've had injuries in years past as well. The Ravens always seem to be dealing with injuries. But Lamar Jackson being fully healthy, they made it all the way to the AFC Championship game, and he won MVP. But the problem is, he lost to the Chiefs. And I think that's where the criticism comes. And I mean, I guess, you know, because it's the Chiefs, you could say, well, not many teams could beat the Chiefs, but you got that's who you got to get past, most likely, to get to a Super Bowl. And you know, that was a disappointing performance by the Ravens. Well, particularly their offense. I mean, their defense, you know, did everything they could, but you know, Lamar Jackson turned the ball over, and you know, the Ravens as a team turned the ball over. They didn't really run the football like they should have. You know, they had their opportunities in that game, and they just couldn't cash in. So I think that's where the criticism comes from. is you got to be able to beat the standard. Now, can Lamar Jackson do it? Well, the Ravens have beaten the Chiefs before. Now, you could look at that game, and I brought up this game a million times from 2021. You know, the Ravens easily could have lost that game. I feel like that the Chiefs gave away that game. So, if it wasn't for that game, Lamar Jackson would be winless against Patrick Mahomes right now. But he does have a win, and the Ravens, I think, are a good enough team that they can beat the Chiefs. But it just hasn't happened. Now, Derrick Henry, who's now 30 years old, is he going to make a difference? I think Derrick Henry's going to have a good year. He's in a very good situation. Him and Lamar Jackson in the same backfield. That's going to be very exciting to watch. Is that going to make a difference? Now, we're going to see these two teams match up right away, right off the bat. In less than 2 months, we're going to see that. And by the way, next week, football starts. We got the Hall of Fame game next week. So, get ready for that. Yeah, those two teams are going to match up, and it should be a very good game. Looking forward to it. But you know, it's you know, the pressure's on, I think, you know, because the Ravens, I think, are going to be good again. I mean, looking at the AFC landscape, I mean, they're a top 3 team in the AFC. They are. But the Chiefs are going to be better. The Chiefs are going to be better this year. If you guys saw that video, you know, the Chiefs in practice, Mahomes just heaving up a bomb to Xavier Worthy. Yeah, those explosive plays that people missed in that offense, they're coming back. They're going to be back. They should be. You know, with him, with Marquise Brown. That offense is going to be how it was when Tyreek Hill was there. So, last year was the year to do it with how the Chiefs were struggling. But they just, you know what? They flipped that switch once they got to the playoffs. So, but the other thing, too, is the Chiefs' defense was really good last year. But, you know, high praise, though. Back to Lamar Jackson, though. Very high praise from, you know, John Harbaugh. You know, I don't remember Joe Flacco ever getting that kind of praise. I mean, maybe you have to go back and look, but you know, Lamar Jackson's a different player. I mean, you know, with what he's able to do with his legs, and you know, we had that conversation. You know, is he the greatest dual threat quarterback of all time? And I think when it's all said and done, probably can be. But in terms of like overall, yeah, I don't think when it's all said and done, I don't think Lamar Jackson's going to be considered the greatest ever. I think got to start winning some championships. You know, you got the 2 MVPs. Now you got to win the big one. If Lamar Jackson can get a Super Bowl under his belt, that would be huge. And you know what? I have no questions about his work ethic. And, you know, and I think he says all the right things. You know, and when they talk to him about the Chiefs, I think in his mind, you know, he says, yeah, we got to beat this team. You know, this team is giving us a problem. But he doesn't say that. You know, he just talks about how it's another game, and he doesn't, you know, think that way. But he probably does. You know, he just doesn't say he just probably doesn't say the quiet part out loud. Well, he hasn't said the quiet part out loud when it comes to the Chiefs. So, yeah, I have no question about that. You know, Lamar Jackson's always trying to improve. And you know what? At some point, maybe he does win a Super Bowl. But right now, it's just been kind of tough for teams because it's just the Chiefs have, you know, won the last 2, and they just don't seem like they're going away. Who's going to be the team that's going to knock them off? The Ravens, I definitely think, could be one of those teams. So, last year should have been the year, but it ended up not happening. So, I expect Lamar Jackson to go out there, though, and have a very good year if he stays healthy. You know, be in contention for another MVP. And, you know, like I said before, you know, I think there's some guys on that Ravens offense that are going to have to step up. You know, particularly when it comes to the pass catchers because, you know, Mark Andrews got hurt last year, but, you know, when he plays, he's, you know, one of the best tight ends in the NFL. They got another good tight end in Isaiah Likely. Zay Flowers had a good rookie season, but I want to see more of these pass catchers stepping up. But they're going to run the football a lot. With Derrick Henry now back there, and of course Lamar Jackson running with it as well. So the Ravens are going to be fun to watch with those two guys. So, but it's good to know for Lamar that he's got a coach that really backs him up. That's got to give him a lot of confidence. And yeah, I mean, he's still got ways to go in his career. So, maybe he goes on a Mahomes type run and, wins 3 Super Bowls in 6 years, but I don't see that happening. But I think, we got a long way to go. Lamar Jackson, if the Ravens, continue to build a good team around him, they got a shot. I mean, at some point, this Chiefs run is going to end, right? So, give somebody else a chance. So, we're going to take our next break. Let me know what you guys think about what John Harbaugh had to say. Again, very strong comments. I don't think when it's all said and done, Lamar Jackson is going to be one of the greatest ever. Maybe, it could be the greatest dual-threat quarterback ever, but, who knows? Who knows? He's got a solid resume, though. But now you got to win a championship here. So we're going to talk about what Darren Waller had to say about Daniel Jones when we come back from our next break. I know we've talked about the Giants these last few weeks, so just, another thing to go over when it comes to the Giants. So stick around, and we will be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast, and for the fourth part of the show, we're going to just talk about some comments made by Darren Waller regarding Daniel Jones. Now, I know Darren Waller is, of course, not with the Giants anymore. He did recently retire, which, it turned out not to be a good deal for the Giants. I was hoping that Waller was going to make a huge impact on this team. I know Waller got banged up, over the course of his career, but with injuries. But I was hoping that, he was going to be a good weapon for Daniel Jones and that was going to work out, but that just ended up not being the case. So, this is what Waller had to say recently, though, on SiriusXM NFL Radio. He said, "I'm just excited for him to get another opportunity. I feel like he gets a bad rep. 2022, he played such good football. Last year was his first opportunity to get out there and play on the new bag. And that he got. It was tough for us as an offense to protect him, and you can't put any quarterback back there and not have any protection and expect them to really thrive in the pocket. Hoping that they can get those things shored up and allow him to have an opportunity to show that he is a talented dude. He's very athletic, get his opportunity to play the football that he was playing in 2022. I feel like that's definitely still in him. But I don't know. I just don't see it. And then Waller also said, I know him for a fact. He's motivated. He's excited to get back out there, excited to lead. That's when you learn the most about dudes, is responding to opportunities like this. So, yeah, that's what he said. Yeah, I don't know. I'm down on Daniel Jones. I have been. I know 2022 was, it was nice to see. I mean, even though the touchdown-interception ratio wasn't great, I mean, the numbers didn't jump out at you, but, he had the rushing touchdowns. And, the Giants exceeded expectations a couple years ago, and, they made the playoffs, and you thought, all right, that's a big step forward. Let's see what happens. And it's just it's a big step back. And I just, at this point, I think the Giants this has got to be it for Daniel Jones, unless he plays really well. That's really what it comes down to. If he plays really well, then forget what I'm saying. I just don't see it. I just don't see Daniel Jones doing enough this year where the Giants go, you know what, we're going to keep you around. Because there's too much of this back and forth because, it's, you had a couple years ago happen and you're like, all right, could be the guy. And now we're back to, well, is he the guy? Is he not the guy? And at this point, if we're still having those conversations with it being 2024 and he got drafted in 2019, probably not the guy. Now, you can make the argument, well, look at what he's had to deal with. You went from Pat Shurmur to Joe Judge to now Brian Daboll. You had Dave Gettleman as the GM. Now you have Joe Shane, which I did bring up last week. And I understand that, he's never had an offensive line. He's never had a number one wide receiver. It's just the Giants just have really failed to build a solid roster for years now. Dave Gettleman tried to do patchwork to try to, squeeze out some more life into Eli Manning's career, and it just didn't pan out. The Giants were not a very good team. Giants have not been a very good team for a long time. You've had 2022, but, at this point, I mean, you count it, but were the Giants a good team? I mean, I guess, but it's, they beat the Vikings, and then what happened when they played the Eagles? They did not belong on the same field as the Eagles. It's just, it's tough. It's been tough to be a Giant fan for the last, 12 years now, since the Super Bowl, because it's gone downhill. And I do feel like with Daboll and Shane that they could get the job done, but right now they don't have the right quarterback in place. I just don't think they do. I think there's talent on this roster, but I just think that the guy that they inherited from the last regime, they got to go in a different direction, and they tried to. They were like, hey, they were like to the Patriots, if you guys are looking to trade that pick, give us a call. Of course, that didn't happen. And, they're like, well, we got to go with Daniel Jones. And they brought in Drew Lock to back him up. You still got Tommy DeVito, Tommy Cutlets. And I'm not going to be surprised if, you see Drew Lock and you see Tommy DeVito play, because durability is a factor. And Daniel Jones just has not been able to stay healthy. 2022, he stayed healthy. Played in every game except for the last game of the season. But I just don't believe that he is the guy. And yeah, I mean, he wasn't getting good protection, but you know what? It's just there are times where he throws interceptions and it's not because of the protection. And he had a fumbling issue too. Ball security, he was having a problem with. So it's just, and when I watch him play, I don't see a guy that's going to lead the Giants to a championship. I never really saw it. So we'll see how this year goes. And, maybe if he goes out there, he throws 30-plus touchdowns and, limits the interceptions, and the Giants win 10 games and make the playoffs, then maybe he is the guy, but I don't see that happening. So that's just my opinion. I mean, Darren Waller has confidence in him, and Darren Waller really didn't play with him that much. I mean, between Waller getting hurt and Daniel Jones getting hurt, I mean, they really just, the most they did really was practice together. That's it. So, I don't know. And I think the Giants, they did some work on the offensive line this offseason. They drafted Malik Neighbors. You brought in Devin Singletary to replace Saquon Barkley. So, and I think Singletary will do fine. But I don't think he's going to be, he's not going to be Saquon. So I think the Giants, they have surrounded Daniel Jones with, some talent to be successful. But I don't know. Because you got Dallas and Philly in your division, and, those quarterbacks are better. And in all likelihood, maybe, Jane Daniels might be better than Daniel Jones, depending on how he plays. So, and when I did my NFC East rankings for quarterbacks, I had Daniel Jones ranked last, partly because I just don't know if he's going to finish the season. So it's tough. The Giants for years, they had stability at the quarterback position with Eli Manning. Eli never missed a start until Ben McAdoo came along and he got benched for Geno Smith. And you know what? They did wrong by Eli too. After the Super Bowl, it's just guys left, guys got hurt. The Giants really just failed to build a playoff caliber team around Eli. And it started up front with the offensive line. That offensive line, the Giants have just failed to build an offensive line for years. I don't know why, because you see teams, again, I don't like to bring up the Chiefs, but look at what happened with the Chiefs in the Super Bowl against the Buccaneers. I brought this up before. The Chiefs' offensive line was horrendous. Guys got hurt. They patched it up in one offseason. Why is it that the Cowboys are able to build these great offensive lines? The Eagles with their offensive line. Why is it that these teams can do it but not the Giants? And you could say, well, it starts in the front office. They're the ones that ultimately make the decisions. It doesn't make sense. They should be able to fix it. And they got a stud at left tackle with Andrew Thomas. But then you got all question marks. Now, again, they signed a couple of offensive linemen. You got a center going into his second season. The Evan Neal pick doesn't look like that is going to work out, but who knows? He's going into his third year now. Starts up front. So if they give Daniel Jones protection, then you know what? It's up to him then. And, I don't want to be wrong. I want him to go out there, play well. But I don't know. I'm just not very optimistic. Not very optimistic. So we'll see what happens. But, it's just... It's going to be another rough year for the Giants, I feel. And I'm going to the Week 1 game against the Vikings, partly because I want to see them wear those throwback uniforms. So I'll get to see up close and personal how Daniel Jones plays, which should be fun. Just to go to a game earlier in the season, against the Vikings, and we'll see who the Vikings start. Whether it's Darnold, whether it's McCarthy, whether it's Nick Mullins. No, it's not going to be Nick Mullins, but it'll be interesting. So, but like I said, I'm just not very high on Daniel Jones. I have no expectations for him. But if he goes out there and he proves me wrong, I hope he does, because then maybe after the after several tries, maybe he is the guy after all. I don't know. It's just we'll just have to wait and see what happens. So we're going to talk about Jordan Love. Let me know what you guys think, though, about the Giants quarterback situation and, just the Giants in general. We'll talk about Jordan Love when we come back. Contract talks supposedly are heating up, so I'll get into that when we come back from our final break of the show. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast, and for the final part of the show, we're going to talk about Jordan Love, some updates on his contract talks. They are supposedly heating up, and I did see an article on NFL.com, as I was in the break, that it said that Jordan Love is not going to practice. Won't practice until new deal is done. So, that shouldn't. Sorry, holding back a sneeze. Like I said, that happens at least once, and the last few times it's happened, it's always towards the end of the show. But, anyways, talks are heating up. They've been having positive discussions, but at least here, no deal is close. Talks are expected to intensify as training camp begins. Love signed a 1-year extension last offseason instead of the 5th-year option on his rookie deal. The extension includes $13.5 million guaranteed, potentially reaching $22.5 million. Love's salary ranks 19th among starting quarterbacks. And you figure once this new deal gets done that, it's going to be within the top 10. You got guys like Trevor Lawrence and Jared Goff that have gotten paid. Last year, Jordan Love, but through 9 games had 2,000 yards passing, 14 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. And then in the final 10 games, including the playoffs, 2,600 yards passing, 23 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. He really turned it around. And it all goes back to what Brian Gutekunst, the GM, had to say, where he's like, yeah, this is a big, this is a big test for Jordan Love, or whatever he said. This is how we're going to evaluate him. Something along the lines of that. And Jordan Love really just turned it up after that. But yeah, it's, the one thing though, and I do agree, this is just 1 year. Can Jordan Love do this again? I think he can. The Packers, have talent around him. They brought in Josh Jacobs as well. They got a ton of talent at the receiver position, a lot of young guys. So I think Jordan Love's going to go out there and have a good year once again. But yeah, there is a risk factor because, you pay him and he plays like how he did in the middle part of the season, and that's who he is. Yeah, that's a huge problem. So we'll see how it works out, but they are having positive talks, and a deal is going to get done before the regular season. I think the way it seems, that's going to happen. But yeah, there is a risk factor, like I said, because Jordan Love could go out there and, like I said, play like he did in the middle part of the season, where the Packers looked like, they had one of the worst offenses in the NFL. Jordan Love was turning the ball over at the end of the game, against the Steelers, against the Raiders, against the Broncos. Yeah, it's just like the games all ended the same. Just Jordan Love throwing it up and it getting picked off. Packers. Well, Packers beat up on the Cowboys in the playoffs, but the Packers they lost close games the same way, but started playing well, and I think maybe we might not see 23 touchdowns to 3 interceptions, but it's going to be something in the middle. Jordan Love and the Packers are going to have games where they're going to struggle, but most teams go through that. But I expect this team to be very good. And also some other news, since we're talking about the Packers, some other news. So the Packers actually paid Kenny Clark recently, one of the defensive linemen, an underrated player in the league, a 3-year, $64 million contract extension. So he will now earn $29 million for the 2024 season. And, yeah. And this is the second with the team after signing his first in 2020, coming off of his 3rd Pro Bowl campaign in the last 5 seasons. 7.5 sacks last season, 16 quarterback hits in 17 games played in 2023. And, the Packers have a new defensive coordinator. So, we'll see how that, plays out, because I know Packer fans, wanted change at the with their defensive coordinator, Joe Barry. You had Joe Barry on that side, and then you had Matt Canada on the other side with the Steelers and their offense. Those guys ended up being moved off of. So, just some more Packers news on that front. So that's a good move there. Yeah, I mean, I expect this team to be good. I think they're... Right now, I'd put the Lions ahead of them. But, I think the Packers are going to be a playoff team this year again. And, yeah, let's see how Jordan Love does now in year 2 as being the starter. It's going to be interesting. And how are these wide receivers going to be now? Because they got a lot of young guys. Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Dontavian Wicks, Jaden Reed. A couple of young tight ends that they drafted, Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave. And then you got Josh Jacobs, who's kind of like, the veteran of the group. It's going to be interesting. I was a little surprised when they cut Aaron Jones, because I thought, wow, I mean, you got Josh Jacobs and Aaron Jones, like, that's great. And then, they let him go. Well, they wanted him to take a massive pay cut, and he didn't want to do that, so now he's with the Vikings. This team's going to be good. I think they're one of the better teams in the NFC, and that's mainly because of how their quarterback played last year, and you're hoping that carries over into this year. So, but they're working on this contract, and I think this deal's going to get done soon, so we'll keep an eye on it. I did want to bring up, though, so over the weekend, found out our draft order for my main league in fantasy. So we had the Costco guys do a cameo. Now, we had Joy Taylor do a cameo a few years ago, and it was like 30 seconds. And no offense to Joy Taylor, but she did kind of screw up a little bit. She said like one of my friends' names twice. She actually forgot someone. No offense to Joy Taylor, but it wasn't the greatest. Now, the Costco guys, their cameo. Now, if you don't know who I'm talking about, they're on TikTok. I mean, I haven't really watched a ton of their videos, but I knew of them. But their cameo was 3.5 minutes long. So, and they did a great job. Now, what was interesting was they gave my friend who, set up the cameo, who's the commissioner of the league, they gave him, I forget what they said, but they basically said, look, whatever pick you get, you could trade it with whoever you want. You can get whatever pick you want, since he was the one that, put in the cameo. I mean, we all had to, pay him. We all chipped in to get this cameo. But, yeah, since he was the one that set up the cameo, he had the opportunity to trade with whoever. Now, we were never going to do that. And he sent the script for them to, to read and, obviously our names so they could randomize it. So, that was never going to happen. But that was funny. It was a good cameo. It was a good cameo, but yeah, so we have our draft order. I actually have the 5th pick. So there's a couple guys that I'm thinking about. But yeah, that's when we're getting closer to football season. And I know there's some other leagues that I'm going to be in, so I got to figure out draft orders with that. But yeah, I just wanted to bring that up. Also, another thing I wanted to bring up too is, listen, I've said it. I do not like doing rankings lists. I think they're hard. I mean, today's the AFC North was difficult to rank, but I did want to read a comment that was left on the Podcast Network YouTube channel. It was on my AFC East rankings of the quarterbacks, and comment is from, I can't even pronounce the username, But this is what he said. So yeah, it's on the segment. So if you go to AFC East QB Power Rankings, who's on top? If you go to the Podcast Network YouTube channel, the individual segment, you'll see the comments. So this guy said, Tua elevates anyone that is coming his way. Hill is better with Tua than with Mahomes. Now who elevates who? And he said something that I'm not going to read on the air. Well, he didn't say the full thing, but the abbreviation of it. He said to be quiet. I'll say that's a nice way to put it. And he said, wipe your nose before analyzing football. And I was like, what am I going to say to this guy? Now, I would say I appreciate, you know what I'm going to say? I'm going to say I appreciate the comment and continue to watch me analyze football. But he said to wipe my nose. I don't think I had to. Because listen, I know my allergies, my sinuses, they've kind of acted up on the show in the past. So, if that's what he's referring to, then, you got me there. But listen, I'm going to continue to analyze football. As long as I'm doing shows here, I'm going to continue to analyze football. So get used to it. But I appreciate the passion. Now, I may not disagree. I may not agree with your comment, but I appreciate it. And if you're watching this, if you want to discuss it more, make sure to tune in. Every Monday through Friday, make sure to tune in, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. So, but again, I said it last week. When you have viewers coming in and commenting, in the live chat, it makes the show better. That way I'm not, like I said, like I've always said, that way I'm not just talking to the void for an hour. I can have some interactions. I appreciate those. Now, maybe be, a little nicer, but, that's going to happen. So, but I do appreciate the comments, and I just hope that, continue to have open-ended discussions and whatnot. Because when football comes back, again, going through the season, that's what I care about the most, is just discussing the games with you guys and things like that. And anything you guys have for me, I'll try to answer you the best I can. So, but that's pretty much it for the show for today. Let me know what you guys think about the Jordan Love stuff. Again, we'll see, what happens. I think a deal will get done at some point, relatively soon. So we'll keep an eye on that. But, I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Make sure to check out all the other shows, of course. Give the other shows some love. And, so that is all the time we have for today. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be back again tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And until then, I'm your host, Kenneth Grunfelder, signing off from the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Have a good day, and I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.